Okay, good evening, everyone here at the NIKI and those who are joining us online. My name is Micha Vanstein, I'm the director, but let me first begin by introducing Jane Adams to you. She is the co-founder and president of Artemisia Gold. That's a global non-profit organization working in the United States, the UK, and Europe. Jane Adams brings extensive experience in PR and communications within the art and cultural heritage sections. During her 10-year tenure as Director of Partnership Relations for Jane Fortune, founder of the Advancing Women Artists Foundation, as a non-profit organization that closed in 2021, more than 70 works of art have been restored, combining conservation, historical research, and public engagement. Following Jane Fortune's passing in 2018, Jane Adams founded Artemisia Gold to continue reviving the legacy of long-forgotten artists with a focus on women artists whose contributions have been obscured or overlooked for centuries. Over the past 5 years, Artemisia Gold has made significant strides, including publishing an in-depth analytical study of Artemisia Gentileschi's Madonna and Child in collaboration with the Galleria Spada in Rome. That was published in 2024, and restoring another Gentileschi masterpiece entitled Let the Children Come to Me, from the Church of San Carlo al Corso in Rome. This project was directed by Jane and was made possible by the generous donation of a fellow board member, Mark Smith. Artemisia Gold collaborates with leading institutions, museums, churches, and scholars, forming global partnerships to ensure world-class and impactful restoration projects. In 2024, to commemorate the 500th birthday of Sir Plautilla Nelli, Florence's first recognized female artist, Artemisia Gold co-sponsored and directed the restoration of 2 of her works. First, the monumental altarpiece Madonna of the Rosary in the Church of San Giuseppe e Santa Lucia in Montaglione, and a small panel painting of the Madonna and Child with Saint Dominic, Saint Catherine, and Saint Agnes, that is kept in a private Florentine collection. Public lectures on these projects were presented not only here in Florence at the Museum of Santa Maria Novella, the Museum of San Marco, and Palazzo Corsini, but also at Trinity Long Room Hub at Arts and Humanities Research Institute, Trinity College Dublin. So I am delighted that Jane has accepted my invitation to speak about her work here at the NIKI, and I wish to thank her also for inviting Professor Catherine Turrill-Lupi, the expert on Plautilla Nelli, to give a talk about the artist's holy conversations. So now it is my pleasure to pass the virtual floor to Jane. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm the one who should be thanking you for your very kind invitation this evening in not just International Women's Week, but also the special week that you have the professors and students from Utrecht University visiting Florence. So I really, really hope that not only will they enjoy this lecture about Plautilla Nelli, but you will also have the opportunity to see some of her works in and around Florence this week. You may not know, some of you may, others not, but actually in your St. Catherine Convent Museum in Utrecht, there is a small panel painting by Plautilla, and Catherine will be telling us more about that painting later. Next slide, please. Actually, we need to jump down 2 if we may. Yeah, so can we go straight? Yes, okay. So this is Plautilla Nelli's masterpiece. So we're jumping from small panels to larger commissions that she carried out for her convent, Santa Caterina da Siena. This is, as I say, her masterpiece. This was a painting that Advancing Women Artists Foundation funded and unveiled in 2019 It was a very complex and lengthy restoration, as you can see. Well, you can't actually quite get the sizes, but it's almost life size. It measures 7 meters by 2, so it truly is her masterpiece. This was, for me, my last project with AWA, that, as you say, it closed its doors when Jane Fortune sadly passed away in 2018. And I, by this time, was so enamored with our mission and Plautilla that I decided to create Artemisia Gold. Why Artemisia Gold? Because at that moment in time, I'd been offered a project down in Rome that you mentioned, and Artemisia Gentileschi. So if we can have the next slide, please, and I'll go on to see Artemisia. Okay, so that's a very brief, talk about Artemisia Gold and our mission. The painting that you see on the left, that is another Plautilla Nelli. That was the small panel painting that we restored in 2024 for her 500-year birthday anniversary. Next slide. Okay, so here we go. This was the first solo project that we undertook under the name of Artemisia Gold. As you say, it was funded by Mark Smith, who is one of our fellow board members. It was quite a particular project in as much as the painting had only recently really been attributed to Artemisia. It was hidden in a sacristy in the church of San Carlo al Corso in Rome, and it was in dire need of restoration. It literally had cracks on it. It was about to explode off the canvas. We were lucky enough during COVID, so during the 2 lockdowns, we created a studio in the church and we undertook a restoration. It was a very exciting project because not only were we able to be on site, and we had visits, so the public were were able to engage and also speak to the restorers and get really close to the painting. The painting then was shown at in Naples. There was an exhibition in 2023 curated by Gabriele Finaldi of the National Gallery. So we're excited that thanks to our restoration, it was able to be shown and appreciated, and, as I say, reattributed to Artemisia. Next, please. Okay, so here we are. During the restoration, not only did we undertake the restoration of the painting, but we also undertook a scientific campaign. We were very lucky. On the left, you can see, taking off, there were 2 linings. So taking off the back lining, we were able to rediscover her signature and also a date, which of course is very, very exciting and something that is very rare. We weren't expecting it, so delighted when it came out in front of us. On the right, you can see an X-ray that shows some of her sketching and also some of her pentimenti bits also missing. You can see the 2 children down the bottom. Right in the middle at the bottom line there is a lot of painting that was actually missing. We couldn't quite work out what was there until we were able to find another copy of the same theme by Artemisia, and it was a dove. Whereas this painting had previously been retouched, and instead of a dove, they actually put a sheep. So we were able to take off the wool and do some in-painting and restore it to what it actually should have been. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we go to the Spada Gallery. As Michael pointed out, we were invited to participate in a diagnostic study. Again, Artemisia Gentileschi, one of her most loved works. It's an early version. She actually did many versions of this theme, Mother and Child. So this, as I say, the painting didn't need to be restored, but it had never been studied. The diagnostics, the x-rays had never been done. So we were asked, and obviously you can't say no to Artemisia. We had the pleasure of, again, on site, taking advantage of being in the museum, Spada Gallery Rome, on a closed day, on a Tuesday, to do the diagnostic studies, which then, next slide please, took us to, here we go, to lots of images, x-rays, where we can see again her pentimenti, which are her changes in composition, and other features that shed light to her her technique and her thoughts and changes in composition. This gave fruit to a book, as you so rightly say. The Spada Gallery actually owns 2 paintings by Artemisia. This painting, and in the room right underneath is her Santa Cecilia playing the lute. We were lucky enough that one had already been studied, so we were able to produce a volume which compared the 2 paintings, which is quite scientific, but it's absolutely stunning and really, really gives you an insight into Artemisia and her work. Next, please. Okay, so back to Nelli, and then I will hand over very, very quickly to Catherine. Yes, so this is another painting. You can't really understand the dimensions here, but this is a huge altarpiece. It's found in a church, San Giuseppe and Santa Lucia in Montaione, which is a little village just outside of Empoli, near Florence. This painting we restored, as I say, in 2024. We actually started looking at this painting back in 2016 when it was attributed to Plautilla Nelli, in dire need of restoration. This isn't a canvas, it's actually on wood. It was absolutely full, both the panel and also the frame of woodworm. So the restoration, it was very delicate. We had to do all the woodworm treatment before we even started. We had the diagnostic campaign also, and then we set to work with the restoration. Restoration was carried out by Rossella Lari. Rossella Lari, I call her the living hand of Plautilla, because she has done several restorations of all the paintings in Florence by Plautilla Nelli. So she truly knows Plautilla's way of painting the eyelashes, the hair, and everything else. So she carried out the restoration. We had Roberto Buda, he is the wood expert. And then we also had a collaboration with the Lorenzo de' Medici Institute in Florence, where we had some students actually help us on the frame. Next, please. Okay, so again, this is part of the restoration process. You can see on the left, the bigger image. This is when we were actually tentatively cleaning. We took different sections that we could just test what solvents were going to be used and how thick, because if you can see all the yellow, a lot of that is dirt and varnish. So that was the very start. On the left again, you've got some Catherine there with some of the cleaning areas. Then on the right, there's one of the X-rays. Left down the bottom, black and white. That again, that's the X-rays, the images where we can see the techniques. She actually uses the spolvero, which is where she uses a cartoon and she does the punching technique and then passes over the gesso, the little holes that she's produced with her cartoon. She goes over with the carboncino and has the dots that then she can join up the dots and get the basis for the drawing, the outline sketches, as it were. On the right, then going back to the woodwork, we had lots of areas that needed to be filled in, and we also put the structure, we had to put that back together again. Next slide. We're almost there. I'm leaving you on this, if I may. This is a quote by Giorgio Vasari. He, in the second edition of his book, The Lives of the Artists, so he was a painter, he was an architect, very famous in Florence. He also wrote about the artists. In his second edition, he writes about 3 female artists, and Plautilla is one. He is a bit cheeky when he writes about her. I think they were in competition. They were all trying to collect the drawings from the greats, the Michelangelos or the Leonardo da Vinci's that were circulating at that time. So he's, as I say, a bit cheeky. And he does refer, in truth, to the fact that she was self-taught, largely. She did refer to the sketches of Fra Bartolomeo that she inherited in her workshop. But she had no formal training. She was a woman, she was a nun, she couldn't study anatomy, and as I say, she couldn't receive formal training. So I disagree with him. I believe she did do great things, and just the fact that today, over 500 years later, she is still inspiring us. Next slide. And this is where I finish and hand you over now to Dr. Catherine Turrill-Lupi. of the California State University, Sacramento. She's a historian. She's a Nelli scholar who over the last few years has made some very important discoveries about Plautilla Nelli. She's found several new works as well. And so thank you, Catherine. I'm going to hand over to you now. Buon ascolto a tutti. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I shall begin. Thank you. The Dominican nun known as Plautilla Nelli was the first Florentine woman to achieve fame as a painter. Although there had been other women artists before her in Florence, especially in convent settings, none were so widely recognized and esteemed in their lifetimes. Plautilla Nelli also was exceptional for her role in establishing and overseeing a thriving art workshop. Under her supervision, the painters and sculptors at her convent produced many religious images for many clients in the second half of the 16th century. The early 20th century artist responsible for the book illustration on the left side of the screen has imagined Plautilla Nelli working on a large painting of the Annunciation, a subject she is known to have depicted several times. However, she and the other artist nuns at her convent probably produced more small panels than altarpieces. It also is likely that their depictions of the Madonna and Child with 2 or more saints, a popular subject for religious art in the Renaissance, were in high demand. The Italian term for this subject is sacra conversazione, or holy conversation, and hence the title of this talk. 5 of the 6 small paintings that you see on the screen now surfaced on the art market in the last 30 years, the same period that saw the rediscovery and reappraisal of Plautilla Nelli. The 6th painting, at the upper left in the group, has been attributed to her since the early 1860s. Following its inclusion in the catalog of the 2017 Uffizi exhibition dedicated to her, the other small panel paintings of the same subject began to be assigned to her as well, starting with the image at the lower left, the Madonna and Child with Saint Agnes, Saint Dominic, and Saint Catherine of Siena. This evening, I would like to discuss how an examination of this group of paintings has given us more insight into art production methods at Plautilla Nelli's convent. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Born on January 29, 1524, Plautilla was the younger daughter of a textiles merchant named Piero di Luca Nelli and his first wife, Francesca di Pier Maria Calandri. Her parents named her Polissena, possibly in memory of her father's mother. Plautilla's older sister, Costanza, born on May 9, 1521, was named after their maternal grandmother. Their father Piero and his younger brother Niccolo were business partners, and the 2 families shared the same home near the picturesquely named Canta alla Cucuia, or Cuckoo Corner, in the Santo Spirito quarter of Florence. Next slide, please. According to legend, the gardens in this neighborhood were once known for the cuckoo birds that nested and sang there. It also was the birthplace of the painter Filippo Lippi. The 15th century fresco, framed by a modern tabernacle at this street corner, and you see it on the right in the slide, may have been the first sacra conversazione that Plautilla ever saw. Now attributed to Bici di Lorenzo, it shows the Madonna and Child enthroned between Saints Peter and Jerome. Christ holds a black and gray bird in his left hand. One might expect it to be a goldfinch, a traditional symbol of the Passion in religious art, but it is generally identified as a cuckoo. Next slide, please. In October 1530, when Costanza was 9 years old and Polissena was 6, their mother died of the plague. Their father took a second wife before the end of the year. No children resulted from that brief marriage, which ended with Piero's death in 1538. the same year that his two teenage daughters made their solemn profession as nuns at the Dominican convent of Santa Caterina da Siena in Florence. Both girls took the names of first-century saints who had been close to St. Peter. Costanza became Petronilla, after St. Peter's daughter, and Polissena became Plautilla, after a Roman widow who was baptized by St. Peter. They were the first nuns at Santa Caterina to take these names. Founded in the first years of the 16th century, the convent of Santa Caterina was located at the intersection of the Via Cavour, then called the Via Larga, and the Via dei Arazzieri, or tapestry makers, overlooking the Piazza San Marco. The side street takes its name from the Medici tapestry workshop that was established there in the mid-1540s, not long after the foundation of the art workshop at Santa Caterina. Plautilla Nelli's artistic training probably began at the convent. When she and her sister arrived at Santa Caterina in the late 1530s, craftwork was an important source of the convent's income. The nuns spun gold and silver thread, wove silk, linen, and other fabrics, and did fine sewing, all practical activities that were recommended to them in the manual composed for their use in the early 1500s. The convent workshop's reputation among textile merchants like Piero Nelli may have been one reason for the family's decision to send his two daughters there. Next slide, please. Miniature painting also was recommended in the convent's manual and is known to have been done by the Santa Caterina nuns in the 1500s. According to Giorgio Vasari, Plautilla mastered this traditional medium before progressing to easel painting. She may have been trained by Maria Cleofe della Scapella, the only painter known to have been at Santa Caterina da Siena when the Nelli sisters arrived in the 1530s. Maria Cleofe composed and probably illustrated the convent's first set of choir books. They were lost long ago. However, the choir book shown on the screen now is believed to have been made at and for Plautilla's convent. This volume was finished in January 1558, 20 years after Plautilla became a nun at Santa Caterina. Next slide, please. Although Maria Cleofe was still active in 1558, she died 2 years later, Plautilla is likely to have been responsible for a miniature image of the Adoration of the Christ Child that decorates a large initial letter in the choir book. The manuscript illumination has an important hallmark of her style. It resembles the work of older artists associated with San Marco, the Dominican friary located across the square from Plautilla's convent. The painters from the so-called School of San Marco were contemporaries or followers of Bartolomeo della Porta, the friary's most prominent artist in the late 1400s and early 1500s. Next slide, please. Frate Eustachio di Baldassare was a respected miniaturist at San Marco who illustrated several choir books for the Cathedral of Florence in the first quarter of the 16th century. He was still active as an artist when Plautilla entered the convent of Santa Caterina in the 1530s. Her depiction of the Adoration of the Christ Child is almost identical to his illustration of this scene. The poses and the costumes of the two figures of St. Joseph closely resemble one another, even to the way in which the mantle's folds cross his right shoulder and gird his waist. The Madonna's blue mantle also is draped in the same way in both images, and the infant Christ has the same pose. Both Eustachio and Plautilla may have referred to one of Bartolomeo della Porta's several depictions of this subject, perhaps something resembling this small painting in Louisville, Kentucky, and you see that on the left side of the screen. Next slide, please. In fact, Plautilla borrowed repeatedly from the works of Bartolomeo della Porta, quoting from his compositions, copying his figures and their poses. The best known example of this practice is her Lamentation with Saints, made for a side altar in her convent's church. As has long been recognized, it is based largely on the altarpiece that Bartolomeo painted for the church of San Gallo in Florence. Next slide. When art conservator Rosella Lari and art historian Fausto Navarro analyzed the two altarpieces several years ago, they discovered that the profiles of the two depictions of the Madonna were nearly identical in both outline and measurement. Because of this very close resemblance, they concluded that Plautilla probably had based the drawing for the Madonna in her painting on a tracing of the corresponding part of Bartolomeo's painting. Next slide, please. Plautilla had other artistic resources as well. When she was painting the Lamentation altarpiece, sometime in the late 1550s or early 1560s, she already had access to a collection of over 500 working drawings by Bartolomeo della Porta, many of which are now in Rotterdam. The 2 pages of chalk sketches for the figures of St. Peter and St. Mary Magdalene, shown in the slide, were among Bartolomeo's preparatory studies for the San Gallo altarpiece. The drawings and other workshop materials had been inherited by another Dominican painter, Paulino da Pistoia, after Bartolomeo's death in 1517. They were transferred to the convent of Santa Caterina da Siena after Paulino's death 30 years later. Vasari knew about the drawing collection and its acquisition by Plautilla Nelli when he wrote the revised edition of his history, printed in 1568. Next slide, please. 41 of the drawings in the Rotterdam collection, including the one depicting St. Mary Magdalene, are stamped with the image of a bird with a slightly curved beak, a long tail, and what appear to be striped breast feathers. This distinctive stamp has only been found on the Rotterdam drawings, all of which came from Plautilla's convent. Furthermore, the mark must have been made on the drawings before the nuns sold them to an Italian collector in the 1720s. A few modern scholars have suggested that the mark may have been intended to signal Plautilla's ownership of the drawings, but they have not agreed upon the type of bird depicted. I think it could be a cuckoo, and that it was selected because of its association with Plautilla's childhood home near the Canto alla Cuculia. Next slide, please. The decision to transfer Bartolomeo della Porta's studio materials from San Marco to Santa Caterina da Siena may have been prompted not only by Plautilla Nelli's reputation as a painter, but also by the steady growth of an active art production workshop within its walls, one capable of making full use of the drawings and other professional paraphernalia. Between 1544 and 1565, 5 of the artist's nuns identified in the later histories entered the convent, including 3 painters and 2 sculptors. They are likely to have been assisted by other nuns whose names are not recorded in the literature. And unfortunately, we do not have a single existing work of art, painting or sculpture, that can be definitely attributed to any of these women. So the actual nature of their work is still unknown to us. The nuns' mastery of the artistic techniques used to produce the Lamentation altarpiece made it easier for the well-stocked, well-staffed workshop to meet the growing public demand for devotional images made at the convent. Vasari, writing 20 years before the end of Plautilla's career, said that her paintings could be found in the homes of many Florentine citizens and were too numerous to be easily counted. The Dominican friar Serafino Razzi, writing after Plautilla's death, said that many of her small paintings also were acquired by clients outside Florence. He later added that the convent workshop's products were known in Rome, Naples, Genoa, and throughout Lombardy. According to his account, these devotional images were valued not just for their workmanship, but also for their association with the blessed hands of the nuns who had made them. Next slide, please. Notwithstanding the scale of the convent workshop's art production, very few devotional images of the type mentioned by Vasari and Razzi were associated with Plautilla until about a decade ago. One exception was the work on the left side of the screen, a painting in Utrecht that was purchased in Italy in the first decade of the 1800s, not long after many of the convents and monasteries were closed and their contents dispersed. Attributed to Plautilla Nelli by 1862, it is an example of a sacra conversazione, a very popular subject for altarpieces in the 15th and 16th centuries. For example, Paolino da Pistoia was commissioned to paint the Madonna and Child with saints for the altar of the nuns' choir at Plautilla's convent in the 1520s. In fact, just about the year of her birth. And that's the painting you see on the right. Next slide, please. In the Utrecht painting, the Christ child, perched on his mother's right knee, reaches toward St. Catherine of Siena, who kneels on the right. On the left side of the composition, St. Dominic, also kneeling, holds both hands open to receive a string of rosary beads that dangles from the Madonna's right hand. Behind him is the Cathedral of Florence, with its unmistakable octagonal dome and vaulted apsis. This backdrop suggests that the recipient of the painting was Florentine. The presence of two Dominican saints suggests that he or she had an affiliation with the Dominican order. Next slide, please. St. Catherine presses a stalk of white lilies against her breast with her right hand. In her left hand, she holds a small heart that has a miniature crucifix superimposed against its bright surface. The red mark on the back of this hand refers to the sacred wounds that she was believed to have received. Like the lilies, crucifix, and heart, the stigmata were a part of her standard iconography and were often included in paintings commissioned by members of the Dominican order. The Utrecht panel could have been made for a Dominican nun. One of the possessions recommended for a young woman entering Plautilla's convent in the second half of the 1500s was a painting about 29 centimeters high, that is, about the size of the Utrecht panel, that depicted the Virgin Mary accompanied by saints of the nuns' choosing. Next slide, please. If the Utrecht panel was made for a nun at Santa Caterina, she might have enjoyed the visual connections between it and three paintings in the convent that she would have seen on a daily basis. The altarpiece painted by Paolino da Pistoia for the nuns' choir, and two of the three lunettes that originally were installed above the large painting of the Last Supper in the convent's refectory. The lunettes are attributed to Plautilla Nelli and her assistants. In Paolino's altarpiece, St. Catherine of Siena kneels before Christ and the Madonna. Christ is reaching toward a red heart that she holds in front of him, much like the infant in the Utrecht painting. The first of the two lunettes shows the Virgin Mary lowering a rosary to St. Dominic, as in the Utrecht panel, and the second lunette shows St. Catherine kneeling in prayer. Like her counterpart in the Utrecht panel, she bears a distinctive wound on the back of her left hand. Next slide, please. The inclusion of a photograph of the Utrecht painting in the 2017 exhibition catalog was followed by the attribution of similar small devotional images to Plautilla and her fellow artists. One of the first works to be recognized as a likely product of the convent workshop, thanks to the several similarities that it shares with the Utrecht panel, was this painting of the Madonna and Child with Saint Agnes, Saint Dominic, and Saint Catherine of Siena. When it was put up for auction in New York State in 2012, it was labeled Anonymous 19th Century Italian. However, as a careful examination later confirmed, it dates from the second half of the 16th century. It also shows the use of materials and techniques adopted by Plautilla Nelli in her other paintings. Finally, like her altarpiece discussed earlier, The Lamentation with Saints, it reflects a first-hand knowledge of the work of Bartolomeo della Porta and his immediate followers. Next slide, please. Saint Agnes, kneeling on the left in this small panel, is comparable to the figure of Saint Margaret in Bartolomeo's altarpiece depicting the Incarnation of Christ. Painted in 1515, it was sent to France shortly afterwards. In placement, pose, and costume, Plautilla's figure of Saint Agnes also resembles Saint Catherine of Alexandria in a painting by Paolino da Pistoia, who is believed to have been at San Marco in 1515, and who, unlike Plautilla, had the opportunity to see Bartolomeo's altarpiece in person. And that is the painting on the right side of the screen. Next slide, please. However, the closest parallel is not with these two altarpieces by Bartolomeo and Paolino, but with one of Bartolomeo's preliminary drawings, part of the collection that was transferred to Plautilla's convent after Paolino's death. Both she and Paolino probably referred to this and other workshop drawings while developing their compositions. An examination of the left side of Plautilla's painting using infrared reflectography revealed the underdrawing for the figure of Saint Agnes. It is very similar to Bartolomeo's drawing for the figure of Saint Margaret in the Incarnation of Christ. In Plautilla's drawing, as in Bartolomeo's chalk sketch, the saint has a more upright stance. The bunched up mantle and the full sleeves have a similar arrangement of pleats, creases, and folds with the same outlines. This is a crucial piece of evidence because the reliance on Bartolomeo's drawing ties the small painting to Plautilla and her convent. The artist responsible for the painting must have had access to the drawing collection that was kept at the convent from about 1550 until 1725, and therefore had to be a nun herself. Next slide, please. The infrared reflectography also revealed a series of charcoal dots that resulted from the use of the pouncing or spolvero technique to transfer the working drawing to the prepared surface of the panel. And you heard earlier about the use of that technique in the Madonna of the Rosary in Montaglione. The closely spaced dots recorded the lines and outlines in the drawing and served as a guide for the artist when she took the next step and began to apply paint to the panel. Pouncing was commonly used in art workshops in the 1400s and 1500s. It also facilitated the production of multiple images sharing the same composition and would have made it easier for Plautilla and her assistants to meet the demands of their large clientele. Next slide, please. The use of the pouncing technique also made it possible for Plautilla and the other artist nuns to produce a series of almost identical portraits of St. Catherine of Siena. These were brought together for the first time in the 2017 exhibition. And I'm showing you 4 here of varying sizes, but using very likely the same cartoons. Next slide, please. I have not seen the results of any infrared reflectography of the other paintings in this series of Holy Conversations, so I don't know what lies beneath the surface of the pigment on these panels. I can say that the 6 paintings are similar in style and composition. Most of them include details that seem to be derived from the work of Bartolomeo della Porta, Paolino da Pistoia, and other artists who often produce paintings for the Dominican community in Florence. Next slide, please. The painting on the right side of the screen was the second to be attributed to Plautilla following the Uffizi exhibition. It shows the Madonna and Child with St. Catherine of Alexandria, John the Baptist, John the Evangelist, and Ursula. It turned up in 2 European auctions in 2021, when it was described as the work of an anonymous Tuscan or Umbrian artist, before being assigned to Plautilla Nelli in 2022, based on the similarities it shares with the Utrecht panel and other paintings assigned to her. It also shows the influence of both Antonio del Ciaiuolo and Paolino da Pistoia, the artist responsible for the main altarpieces in the public church and nuns choir at Santa Caterina da Siena. Next slide, please. Judging from the similarities between their poses, profiles, and costumes, Paolino's drawing of a kneeling female saint holding a palm frond, part of the collection that is now in Rotterdam, may have been the source for the figure of St. Catherine of Alexandria in this panel, that is, the saint kneeling on the left. The smooth pietra serena stonework and the central figure group of the Madonna and Christ Child may have been derived from a painting by Antonio del Ciaiuolo, such as this altarpiece that is now in Fort Worth, Texas. Next slide, please. The stonework in the central figure group, with the Madonna and Child posed in exactly the same way, also appear in another Sacra Conversazione that was sold at Sotheby's in London back in 1996. I came across this poor color photograph several years ago and have not yet located the painting. It was not attributed to Plautilla Nelli in 1996. It's just an anonymous Tuscan. I doubt that I would have made the connection myself were it not for the Utrecht panel. And next slide, please. Possibly intended for a Dominican client, the Sotheby's painting shows the Madonna and Child with Saints Dominic and Catherine of Siena. An angel kneeling at the right holds the heart that St. Catherine offered to Christ in the Utrecht panel. Here, the saint's hands are otherwise occupied because she is holding both a stalk of lilies and a book. The small panel is about 29 centimeters high, which, as was mentioned earlier, is the size of a devotional image recommended for a nun in the second half of the 1500s. The painting easily could have been another product of the convent workshop. Next slide, please. I have saved the 2 outliers in the group for last. Each of these paintings brings together 2 popular themes in religious art: the Madonna nursing the Christ Child, which is also the subject of a drawing attributed to Plautilla Nelli, and a holy conversation. The poses and outsized proportions of the Madonna and Child are very similar in these 2 paintings, suggesting that the artists responsible for them may have worked from the same cartoon or transfer drawing. Next slide, please. The use of a cartoon also could explain the resemblance between the female saints kneeling at the left in 2 of the paintings that you see on the screen now. St. Catherine of Alexandria in the panel that was assigned to Plautilla Nelli in 2022, and St. Mary Magdalene in the panel on the right, which was sold at auction in 2016 with a very misleading attribution to an anonymous 19th century artist from the Continental School. An outstanding feature in the painting on the left, which was sold under Plautilla's name in Florence 2 years ago, is the dazzling array of simulated gold embroidery, especially on the red robes worn by Saints Stephen and Florence. It is a good reminder of the gold thread craftwork that was done by the nuns at Nelli's convent at the time of her arrival there. I was able to see this panel firsthand several times in Florence. It has many small details that merit close examination, not just the embroidered panels and borders for the clothing, but also the tiny flowers and pebbles scattered across the ground. In fact, these features are one of the reasons for attributing this painting to Plautilla Nelli. She was known during her lifetime for incorporating minute details in her small paintings. Her contemporaries mentioned this quality in their praise of her work and attributed it to her early experience as a miniaturist. Next slide, please. The 6 holy conversations that we have just examined share enough similarities to be assigned to the same workshop. However, they may not have been made by the same artist. Like Plautilla Nelli's Last Supper, which was painted for the convent's refectory and bears her name and a signature inscription at the left, they also show signs of the collaboration of several artists working under the supervision of a single master painter. Plautilla was the convent's madre pittora for much of her 30-year career as an artist, only handing over the workshop's administration to another artist nun during her 3 two-year terms as prioress. Despite these interruptions, she and her assistants managed to produce enough paintings to impress their contemporaries. We have only just begun to assemble the results of their successful enterprise. Thank you.